Normal people become terrified of criminals.
Shots were just fired. Police just came out and told us, and we're headed there right now.
They become terrified of their own government.
There are cities across America. I remember, Texas, there are a couple, I think Matthew McConaughey and a couple other actors who are trying to push Texas growing its film industry. I mean, obviously Atlanta has like a film industry right now. There are states across the U.S. that have a film industry that exists. It's just not as big as Hollywood, right?
That's right. This was shot in Birmingham. It was a Birmingham crew. Birmingham, Alabama shot this. And Birmingham, surprisingly, is a very dystopian looking place for a film.
Wow.
Yeah, it's got a lot of rundown buildings, a lot of beautiful architecture.
There's a scene
and
in here.
And we needed beautiful architecture with the rundown look.
Yeah.
There's a scene in here, like the climax scene is in this old historic building.
It's a Messianic temple.
Yeah, but who spoke there? Like it was
Martin Luther King
Martin
Jr.
Luther King spoke there.
Yeah, He spoke at that, in that same spot where the final scenes are.
Was where he spoke.
Or where you see him like on the screen looking at his wife. Yeah, Martin Luther King Jr. spoke there.
So do you find that there are a lot of people in the film industry who are reaching out to you to say, I want to be involved with Angel Studios, but I'm not based in Hollywood. I'm based over here doing whatever. Like, is it sort of becoming something people reach out to, not just to get their film made, but for their professional careers?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can only, right now, Angel only accepts what we call a torch. Mm-hmm. And this harps back to the beginning of crowdfunding. So the Statue of Liberty, originally Frederick Bartholdi made a torch. He took it around Europe to raise money. He took it around the U.S.
He couldn't get governments to pay for it.
Right.
So he actually had to crowdfund the Statue of Liberty.
Right.
And
what a time back in the day when governments didn't just cut checks for everything.
So the French and the American people saw that torch and they caught the vision for what he was trying to create. And the same way, somebody brings a torch, a video, a short film, or a full film, if it's going to go to theaters like Sound of Freedom, and then the guild looks at it, they catch the vision of where they're trying to head with it, and they vote yay or nay.
Mm-hmm. But if I were like a cameraman and I was based in, North Carolina, do you have people reaching out for those kind of production type jobs, or do you have to direct them somewhere else?
So each production has its own casting department, and David's being done in South Africa. We've got productions in the UK.
David's a film about King David.
Yep.
It's an animated musical that's coming in 2025. It's a $62 million film that they crowdfunded.
Crazy.
Yeah. So these are done in different places. The Chosen is shot in both Goshen, Utah, and just outside of Dallas, Texas. And the
Shift crew, it's got the guys who did the music for The Chosen, Dan Hasseltine and Matthew Nelson did it, and it's phenomenal. Like the score on this is unlike anything you've ever heard. There's nothing generic about it.
Yeah.
Those guys did Jars of Clay, the band back in the day.
Yeah.
They've scored now The Chosen and this, and they're two of the best movie scores. Like they're just.
But it doesn't sound anything like The Chosen score.
Yeah, it sounds nothing like it. Yeah. Then you've got one of the producers was the editor for Sound of Freedom.
Mm-hmm. That's
and
very cool.
He also edited Cabrini, which is coming out in March. And then, so there is a cross-pollination happening between the groups. So like Alejandro Monteverde, who directed Sound of Freedom and Cabrini, came in and consulted to help Brock get to the point where he could pass the guild.
Right.
Because he was trying to figure out how to get his score up, and Alejandro said, well, if you did this or if you did this, he
can give professional feedback.
He gave some really great ideas, or the creators of Tuttle Twins spent some time on it. And so these different filmmakers join around you once you've kind of reached this point where you're building a film.
Yeah.
Because they need you to succeed as well, because it's part of the community.
But to be honest to your question, Hannah, like we're not replacing the Hollywood craft.
Mm-hmm.
Like all these productions, they're using SAG actors. They're using teams that are part of the Hollywood network, because Hollywood is better at making movies than anyone else in the world.
Yeah, I always think
craftsmen, and they're not ideologically opposed to this.
Right, I was going to say, I think it's interesting because we talk about building culture and movies, and I think that's great and excellent. But I would think all of the people that need to make the film, or it's not just the actors or the people cutting it together. It's also the people holding the mics and the people with the cameras. Like those skills have ties to Hollywood.
And those
and
guys
their own
just
industry.
love making great art.
Yeah.
They don't care if the art is nihilistic,
or maybe
or if it praises God,
Yeah.
or if it's in between somewhere. They don't care as long as it's great art.
That's
what they
interesting.
don't like making is campy, cringe stuff.
So they want something better. They don't want to just make
Yes.
the same 5 movies over and over
So
again.
That's right.
To reach the level that's
It's the
required,
gatekeepers that are the problem.
reach the level that's required for the Angel Guild, you pretty much have to have that level of craft, which means you're calling on the resources of the storytelling world to do that. So if people are interested, they have to get involved in the casting groups, and they have to get involved in acting and work their way up in the industry, and then they'll have a chance. But what we saw is that the problem with Hollywood is that it's become too insular. It's become a bubble, and very few people make these story decisions. And then they're pushing their views on the world and the way the stories are told. And because they hold the keys to the gate,
Those are the only stories that get out.
those are the only stories that get
But now
out.
it's
And
not
we're
working anymore.
replacing the gatekeepers
Yeah.
with the people.
We're replacing it right at the same point where it stopped working.
Are you ever concerned that like having Alejandro come in and advise, his name?
Brock Keasley?
To advise Brock is going to create a similar problem where a lot of the genres it's a similar genre because a lot of the interactivity amongst the artists is going to pigeonhole.
Some, except for Brock was already so far down the road. He's more helping him solve. It's like a mechanic saying, "Hey, I can diagnose the problem with your storyline that you're facing. Let me give you the diagnosis, and here are a couple of ideas to solve it." And then Brock went and solved it in his own way.
Right.
Right.
And Brock actually, like the first time that the first ideas to try to solve it actually didn't work. But the combination of those two ideas, they got to a solution. And but Brock made the final call on what it was.
I would imagine he'd already have the vision prepared and that he's just doing technical crafting at that point. But,
Yeah, there's just
In this case,
Alejandro
it
wants
was
to
really. In this case, it was probably really mostly about just clarifying, making sure that the story
Curse
came
of
through.
knowledge stuff.
Came through really, really clear.
Yeah, a lot of
Sometimes
times
you know your story so well you don't realize why people
exactly.
can't
When
get
the writer directs their own work, that's not a big problem, but can pose a big problem. I think George Lucas had that problem with some of the new episode 1, for instance. It's just like a fantasy in his head. I didn't understand what the point of that movie was, to be honest, at all. There was no villain. It was very weird. Very poorly done villain with Darth Maul. So I think getting out of the writer's hands or having an advisor come in that can help you maybe direct or from the sidelines, just so you know, just because you see it and know it doesn't mean the audience does.
What else is coming? Cabrini?
We got Cabrini coming. We've got
There's actually a slate of 8 next year, and we're shooting for 12 in 2025.
we're building a Young Washington movie that kicks off it's a movie first. We're doing it with John Irwin, who did Jesus Revolution, I Can Only Imagine,
American Underdog.
American Underdog. Has the most A+ cinema scores of any director in Hollywood. So John's building one on the founding of America with Young Washington, and his goal is to release that next year. He's got to pass the Guild, of course. But the idea is to launch something similar to The Chosen around the entire founding of America.
Oh,
To where
cool.
It's
Like
a
a series.
universe.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
a
wow.
universe around the founding of America, because we haven't gone into that very much.
I'd love to play Ben Franklin. I don't know if he was fat when he was young.
Yeah.
Let's roll.
You actually you could do it.
Totally do that.
We'll do the whole thing. I'll wear it, anything.
We need to,
Take that kite up in the air. I don't know how deep into George's life it's going to go.
that's going to be really fun.
Yeah.
Then so we've got that one. We've got another one called Homestead that Neil McDonough is in as well, and it's an end of the world one where all the power goes out, nuclear bomb hits, and they're trying to survive on a homestead. Essentially, it's based in our time. Then there's Bonhoeffer, Friedrich Bonhoeffer, famous pastor from Germany that fought against Hitler. He was the most famous pastor in the country at the time, and he has one of his biographies are some of the best-selling books ever. And but Bonhoeffer goes from pacifist Christian to saying, I will help try to assassinate the Fuhrer.
Wow.
And the difficulty of him trying to figure it out
As a Christian
what he should be doing. And that film that's a big budget one. That one we just signed like a week ago. There is David. It's a musical. It's like Prince of Egypt.
Cool.
It's like the Old Testament. And it's this beautiful animated movie for kids. And because David was a musician, he wrote the Book of Psalms, which is just a book of songs. It's actually like motivated. So if you go to angel.com/Timcast and you join the Angel Guild, you get a vote on all the different projects. And then you're going to get complimentary tickets to every single time we release a theatrical release. And what this does, we have 175,000 people right now in the guild. But imagine it once you get 1 million people in the guild. Then let's say half of them turn up to theaters.
It's just
because they got their complimentary tickets.
You Taylor Swift.
Every single movie.
That's how we change the culture.
Exactly, no one can compete with you at the point.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be like, they've got a natural pull. Are you familiar with the, like, what's a venue's natural pull? So if you, with you guys having a guild, you're like, oh, our movies basically guaranteed to sell out X many seats because of the amount of people who love our movies.
That's right. And
Something
so more
Hollywood can only
filmmakers
guess at.
come because there's guaranteed seats. And right now we've got 175,000, which means we're doing a lot of pre-sales. But once we hit a certain point, it's unstoppable, right? And when you're joining the Angel Guild, you're joining this movement where you get to pick the content. It's not us. We're not the ones picking it.
You get to trust whatever comes out.
You get to trust what comes out. You know it's all going to be good because the bigger the guild gets, the better it picks.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.